My daughter's first sentence was "It's a beautiful day." Cute. She would wake up in the middle of the night, for months, screaming at the top of her lungs, "It's a beautiful day," over and over and over again. When did you realize your children were insane? Put this in another thread recently, but a couple of weeks ago I found my 5-year-old son singing "Happy Birthday" to the toilet. I didn't ask why. Most likely because it was the toilet's birthday. I was listening to Car Talk with my 1.5-year-old daughter on the radio one day. As you may know, Click and Clack laugh at everything. Every time they so much as chuckled, she laughed along with them, for the duration of their laughter. As soon as they stopped laughing, she would abruptly stop laughing and return to a neutral face. When my sister was about 2, she was drinking milk from a sippy cup. She took a big gulp, but didn't swallow. She liked to do this, letting the milk reach body temperature. She then waddled over to my unsuspecting dad and waited until he opened his mouth. My poor dad, mid-sentence, had a bunch of warm milk spit into his open mouth by my insane sister. Your sister is a penguin. Not insane, just inherited a potty mouth. He didn't hear this from me, swear it. He was playing Mario on the Wii while I was working. He dies, turns to me and says real quiet like he knows what he's saying is wrong. He says, "Fricking Goombas," then puts his best grin on his face and goes back to playing. Hardest I've ever tried not to laugh in my life. It was a dark day. The rain was hammering down. It had just started thundering. My kid sat on a rug with his back to me building a Lego towering. He slowly turned his head around, without moving his body much, and sang slowly, without any emotion, "It's raining, it's pouring." He looked possessed. I've never been so creeped out in my life. Holy frick. Goodbye sleep. When my nephew was 4, I was hanging out with him and he kept on trying to climb onto the stair railing. I told him not to, because if he falls he could hurt himself. He looked at me and yelled, almost gleefully, "I want to set my blood free." Metal as frick. The other day I was looking after my 2.5-year-old while my wife was at work. We were watching TV when she got up, slowly turned around and started waving slowly while whispering, "Bye bye mummy, bye bye," over and over. I had to call her up to make sure she wasn't dead. Well, that's absolutely horrifying. In her little walnut brain she was basically saying, "Okay, I'm ready to get up now." 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, didn't matter. It's all she knew how to say. Could be a freaking hurricane outside, "It's a beautiful day," over and over and over again. Was pretty absurd and annoying at the time. Funny now, however. What a horrible night to have a curse. My little sister, who was 2 at the time, used to eat dishwasher tablets and talcum powder. She would shut herself in the cupboard and we wouldn't find her until 10 minutes later, by which point she would have a mouthful of froth and powder. I used to eat cat food and slugs though, so I'm pretty sure it's just something that runs in the family. A couple of other stories. One Easter at 5 years old, I thought a bit of foil from an egg was really cool and my cat would like to see it, but he wasn't around to show him. Having no pockets, I scrunched it up in a ball and put it in the next best thing, my nasal cavity. Had to go to A&E to get it taken out and remember being really distressed. Not because it was painful or scary, but because I knew they'd throw away the foil and my cat wouldn't be able to see it. A couple of Halloweens ago my brother and I decided to make a scarecrow. Its face was a skeleton mask we had laying around and we propped it up outside the kitchen window so it was peering in, which petrified the frick out of everyone except my aforementioned sister, who was 4 at the time. Instead of being freaked out, she called it Basil and would go outside every morning to tell it good morning and kiss it before she went to sleep at night. After Halloween was over, she was distraught that we took him apart and took the mask everywhere with her, including reception, kindergarten for non-UK folks, and snuggled up with it in bed. Wasn't my child, but my friend's niece. She was about 3 and we were having a tea party with 2 of my friends, Gabby and Pilissa. She was overdoing the cute act, and about halfway through, when Gabby and Pilissa left the room to make more tea, she slowly turned to me and said, "Gabby loves me, Pilissa loves me. Who's your best friend now?" Whoa, that almost sounds like a threat. Dang, 3-year-olds are vicious creatures. This is about my brother. We always knew he was a little nuts. He really struggled with the concept of glass being clear but solid. Many doors were aggressively four-headed, windows punched, etc. But we finally figured out he was insane at about age 7 when him and a neighbor kid were jousting using bikes and shovels in the backyard. My brother and I did this with brooms and trash can lids on our bikes after our mum took us to the Ren Fair one year. A week later she found us in the garage trying to hammer the metal trash cans into armor and sharpening the broom handles to dangerous points. We were taking things to the next level and getting ready for our own crusade. My daughter says very weird things around cemeteries, and I have no idea where she gets it from. Not sure if she saw it on TV while I wasn't looking or not, but whenever we pass one, we have to whisper. She also said we should have a picnic at the cemetery where my brother, her uncle, is. She loves the movie Coraline and pretty much all creepy kids movies. And when she was 4, she asked to go into the spirit store every weekend because she loved watching the creepy dead baby display when they moved around. She stood there for 20 minutes every time. Pretty macabre, but who am I to judge? When I was like 5, I saw a Pepsi commercial where a goldfish was given Pepsi and did backflips and all this cool crap. Now we had tank with about 5 goldfish in it and I always thought they were quite boring, but I wasn't allowed to drink soda, so I thought my milk would do. Long story short, fish don't like milk. The story of my boyfriend's niece. She was maybe 4 or 5 at the time, and her father had this massive tank with about $20,000 worth of tropical fish. She was left alone for whatever reason, and when they found her, there was no bringing the fish back, and she killed them in the perfect way. First she put flour in the tank, which clogged the filters. Next she dumped in rubbing alcohol, which would have been okay with a working filter, but instead caused the fish to bleed from their eyes and gills. After that it was a barrage of random, yet meaningful items including a Bible. My boyfriend says she read them their last rites. I killed my dad's 20 tropical fish when I was a toddler. Apparently they don't like cheese and milk. My dad didn't get another fish tank until we had all moved out of home 20 years later. I keep finding my daughter trying to put plastic bags over her head. Stop trying to kill yourself. Your life is awesome and you are 4. Oh, I remember being very disappointed when I was 4 and my parents wouldn't let me put bags over my head. I honestly cannot remember why I had such a strong desire to do it, but I did. My 18-month-old likes to shout at the dogs. The best way I can describe it is dragon shouting from Skyrim. He also likes to randomly jump off the couch and runs into walls. Earlier he woke up screaming his head off. I picked him up, rubbed his back, and he let loose a belch that rattled the windows and promptly passed out in my arms. He is a little beast, and I love him. I don't have kids, but here's a little story from when I was 6. I was in my room drawing, probably some type of woodland creature, and I had a revelation. I ran to the banister of the 2nd floor and called down to my dad. Dad, is the meaning of life to die? He came over to the stairs, looked back up at me, and just kind of shook his head. Then he went back to gutting trout on the kitchen table. This reads like Hemingway. Beautiful. My kid doesn't have an imaginary friend. He has an imaginary universe. He is 5, edit, just turned 6 actually. That's what you get for commenting after several hours at a wine and cheese festival. All the planets have their own language, currency and social and government system which is very different from Earth's. What I find interesting is that he doesn't vary his stories at all, they are very consistent. If I ask him how the government works in ULA, he gives me the same answer 6 months later. It is really detailed and well thought out. I can ask him almost any question about any planet and he answers it instantly. TLDR. My kid is either nuts or an alien. When daughter was 1.5 she said something funny. I told her she was a comedian. She screamed back, I'm not a Canadian. I told my nephew, 4, that I was going to take him to the local mall with me because he was a chick magnet. He replied, I am not a chicken maggot. Classic. When my daughter was 9 months old, she would climb out of her crib every night and fall onto the floor. We bought her a larger crib. 1 month later, she figured out how to climb out of that. When we bought protective netting to prevent her from falling out, she screamed so loudly that neither of us slept for about 2 weeks. Then, She figured out how to climb up on top of her crib, dismantle, and pull down the baby-proof netting. I wasn't sure if she was insane, a genius, or we hadn't installed it correctly. Most likely the first one. I'm just glad she's out of cribs now. I used to escape from high chairs at the dinner table as a toddler. I'd raise my arms way up in the air, put on my best crap-eating grin, and then slide out the bottom and run around the house laughing my butt off with my parents trying to catch me. Our daughter, when she was about 3, used to wake up in a panic, screaming and crying, not knowing where she was. This would last for a good 30 or 45 seconds. Then she would take a couple of minutes to calm down and quit crying. It was very disconcerting. I finally noticed that it only happened when she went to sleep under too many covers and got too hot. After that, we were more careful and it stopped. Read up on such things and discovered that it can be an indication of either high intelligence or schizophrenia. She got her PhD in biomechanical engineering a couple of years ago, so I guess we dodged a bullet on that one. My 5-year-old son has learned how to use the voice memo function on my iPhone. Instead of playing games, he spends time recording 5 to 30-second clips of himself saying odd phrases or making high-pitched squeals into the microphone. Save them into your computer. Send them to your own Gmail account. Whatever you do, don't lose them. You can use them against him and in your favor. In 10 years they will elicit shame and provide revenge. In 20 years they will still elicit shame, but they will now provide nostalgia. Apparently one of my first words was cheese. I got up early, toddled out of bed, went into my parents' room and grabbed my dad's finger. He woke up and asked what I wanted. I pulled on his finger and walked him over to the refrigerator in the kitchen. Once there, I pointed up at it and said, cheese. He told me that he laughed and gave me some cheese. You had a bright future ahead of you if one of the first words you learned was cheese. My 5-year-old daughter has an obsession with the word dong. This came about when at a Christmas party last year the guy who was playing Santa Claus was particularly unfriendly with my brother and his family. When my daughter said out loud after he left what his name was, my brother said that his name was Dong. So now, whenever she sees Santa Claus at the mall, or in pictures, she just looks at him and says, dong. She talks in full sentences, but whenever she sees Santa she just says the word dong. Last year she noticed that the mall Santas weren't all the same person and asks if they have a database somewhere of all of the dongs in the world, and it made me laugh when she said that. As we approach Christmas this year, I'm sure I'm going to have to explain to more than one person what she means by dong. I'm also going to have to tell her that dong is actually Santa Claus. TLDR, dong equals Santa. When opening presents on Christmas I was 3, I think. My aunt begged me to open hers first because she had to leave and she had spent a lot of money on it. I opened the box and it was a realistic baby doll. I tossed it aside and this upset her, but I didn't notice, nor did I care. My father, in an attempt to get me to like the doll, began to rock it and call it his baby. Angrily, I grabbed it out of his arms, bit its ankle, and threw it across the room. A few days later, my mother was cleaning up my toys from our sandbox, and she noticed a baby doll's leg sticking out from the sand. I had buried it. I get this feeling that maybe you did not want a baby brother. My 3-year-old informed me out of the blue one day that no one likes Buffalo Wild Wings. He is also capable of just talking to himself for upwards of 20 minutes. I can talk to myself for upwards of 20 minutes too. It's less impressive when you're 23. I don't have a story about my kid, but I do have one from when I was a kid. Between the ages of about 2 to 3 years old, I would apparently get really upset, turn bright red, and smack my head on the kitchen floor repeatedly. Apparently, when I was in better moods, I would take it upon myself to crawl into the cupboards and gnaw on raw potatoes. Also, for a long period the only word I would say is orby. I consider it a miracle that I'm able to tie my own shoes. I saw an old guy eating a raw onion outside of a Walmart once. When I walked in to find her Ken doll naked and tied to a chair, with all the other Barbies standing round looking at him. Not my child, but when I was 3, we were on a car trip and drove past a truck with a picture of a dolphin on the side. Mum said, "Look at the dolphin." sweetie, and I replied, I think you'll find that is a porpoise. My child is nuts, but this is made much more horrifying by that fact that at 3 years old, she's about 3'8", and 45 pounds. So, not only is she rambunctious, she has the brain of a toddler and the body of a kindergartner. I think it was the last time we went to her playgroup. There were 2 little boys roughly her age that were fascinated by her size and her energy and wanted to play with her. Mind you, this was a very fussy group of moms that fretted endlessly about any cry, fuss or stumble. So, my daughter is running with the little boys when she climbs the jungle gym, waves at them and leaps off, sticking the landing in perfect form before going to steal the little girl's soccer ball. I stopped this. The little boys, much littler physically, were so inspired they raced up the jungle gym to follow her example. The moms panicked and we were not invited back. Not long after she changed her name to George. TLDR. My daughter is huge, jumps off dangerous stuff and changed her name to George. She should meet my niece. She is currently 4 years old and about 4'3". She is in kindergarten this year because she was too smart for preschool and would convince other kids to do naughty things with her when she got bored. Last year she was Spider-Man for Halloween and this year she is a dragon. She really wanted to be a half cat half dinosaur, but sadly the store doesn't make that. Not my kid but my 5-year-old nephew. I was keeping an eye on him while he was running around the playground at the park. He asked a boy what his name was and then introduced himself as Batman. He was probably just playing around. I doubt he's really Batman. My younger sister's first words were happy birthday. She also thought it was a bad word, which we didn't find out until her 2nd birthday when she started crying. She would also scream happy birthday when she was mad at people too. She was extremely cute. Happy birthday to the ground. My sister was about 2 years old and every night she would wake up, she would start laughing and pointing. Eventually she would start screaming and telling whatever she was pointing at to get away, but whenever asked about it she would act all shy and embarrassed. Recently it's been run dancing through the house singing fractured ABCs whilst holding onions in each hand. He's 2 years old and an endless supply of hardness, lol. B, C, D, I, F, J, L, M, N, O diaresis. Thanglumglnafkthalhualiawaganaglfitan. My first words were oh crap. My parents were surprised and went and spoke to the woman who ran my daycare, who also happened to be a big Harley Davidson person, and the woman informed my parents that my children may use 4-letter words but they will never use double negatives. Mom and dad decided that was fair enough. Bravo. I don't have kids, but apparently when I was 3.5 I took my cup of orange juice, poured it out over our brand new VCR, said VCR thirsty, and then put my bologna sandwich inside of it. Other weird things about me. I called long stretch buses Recordian stretchy buses. I talked about cemeteries a lot, but since I could not pronounce it, referred to it as the dead place, where you go to die, unless you're just visiting. Every time we passed one in the car I'd peer my head out the window and just stare and wave at it. I also remember wishing to get lost in the grocery store so a new and better family would take me home. I also attempted this by sitting outside of my house on the curb with my thumb in the air attempting to hitchhike. I was never taken to a better family, thankfully. Heard an almighty crash from the baby's room early one morning. Rushed in to find he had undone every screw with his fingernails and then sat against the back and kicked the front with his legs so that the whole cot collapsed onto the floor. He was sitting there laughing proudly. We put it together again and then tied it all up, but he still enjoyed taking the screws out. Eventually got him a little portable typewriter and a screwdriver and he dismantled the whole thing. My youngest daughter was about 2. She was sitting next to me and she started digging her toenail into my leg and scratching me. I said, ouch, why are you scratching me? She replied in the creepiest low whispery voice I had ever heard. Think exorcist, 'cause you're beautiful. Since everyone always says I'm not a parent, my brother once got caught smuggling bologna into our shared bedroom at bedtime by pulling up his shirt, sticking it to his stomach, and then pretending to be asleep until he could dine in peace. Shortly afterward, he shifted his affections to peanut butter and cheese sandwiches. My cousin's kid is the best. Around 3 years of age he wanted to be excused from the table. His mom told him he had to finish his dinner. He gets up, dumps his plate in the trash, and announces that he is finished. A year later, she takes him to the pediatrician for a checkup. The doctor asks him what he likes to eat and then asks if he likes fish. The kid gives him this horrified look and informs the doctor that fish belong in the aquarium. At 5, he witnesses a priest from their church having a heart attack. His grandmother decides that it would be nice if all the kids drew the priest a picture card while he was in the hospital. They are a very churchy family. The kid draws a picture of the priest laying on the ground. Isaac set out, with ambulances in the background. This past summer, the same grandmother received a bracelet for her birthday. When my cousin remarked how much she liked it, the little dude says, "You can have it after grandmother dies." Yeah, the thing is, the kid is not trying to be funny. He is the oddest little guy I know and he is really sweet, just very unusual. My daughter calls me mom. She will point at me and say mom. I'll correct her and say no sweetheart, dad, and she'll go quiet for a moment then point again and say mom. Happens plus 200 times a day. The third word, words, our son learned was what's that, which of course is pretty dang useful at that age. Unfortunately, now he uses what's that for anything he can't convey also. Imagine a 1-year-old, crying his eyes out, pointing in all directions while shouting what's that over and over. Yeah, I'm usually none the wiser. Not my child, but I live with my baby niece. She laughs and giggles when someone on the TV cries in pain. Her parents watch Supernatural and she doesn't freak out at demons popping out and killing people. She laughs so hard at that, but when an angel comes down, normally women with blonde hair and a white dress, she cries and flips out. It's kinda freaky. So does my cousin. Right now we're watching Supernatural, and she's clapping and laughing as a Reaper attempts to kill the main character. Until our daughter was about a year old, she'd cry every time her dad mooed at her, even in her sleep. We couldn't get her to burp unless we bounced her on our knees. She learned to speak very well very early. At 18 months, nearly 2 knuckles deep in her nose, her dad asks her, "Are you digging for gold?" "No, I digging for boogies." At not quite 2, after receiving a toolkit, "Are you fixing your rocking horse, honey?" "No, I'm screwing my pony." At 3, "Mom, I'm going to be famous in a band. I'm going to call it Bingo Smarkies in the band, and everyone I know can be in it and sing. Except you. You don't sing very good." And a month ago at 5.5, after letting a huge one rip I could hear all the way down the stairs, there was a short pause and hysterical laughter. "That was a good one, Mom. I just love smelling my own farts. Its smelliness fills my room up with really good fragrance." I had to ask her to repeat herself until I got that last word right. She also insists at bedtime that her dad wrap her up right in a blanket and run her up and down the hall yelling like Vikings. They call this ritual burrito battering ram. She also has been convinced she's a dog since she was a year and a half. Your kid sounds awesome. I look forward to the debut album from Bingo Smarkies in the band. Not my kid, but my sister. When she was pretty little, my mom said something about her being her daughter. My sister immediately starting bawling, all the while screaming, "I'm not a daughter." I don't think she knew what it meant, and that it was some horrible thing. I have 2 daughters. Let's designate them by their ages, 2 and 4. 2, I'm a princess. I'm a pretty princess. 4, good. Here's an apple. Now die. They were playing Snow White and the Evil Queen, and they're actually very close and sweet to each other. The conversation just sounded weird out of context. When I was little, I was absolutely obsessed with vacuum cleaners. I would go over to people's houses, find their vacuum and vacuum up a storm. When my mom asked me what I wanted to do for my 3rd birthday, I said I wanted to have it vacuum cleaner store. My mom was determined to make this happen. She went to the Kirby dealership and said she was only buying one of their $1, 4,000 vacuums if her son could have his birthday party there. I guess they really wanted to sell a vacuum because she was able to make it happen. I would watch the informational VHS that came with our Kirby at least 3 times a day. I was a weird one. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.